Out west, where the land is wide and the silence older than memory, a woman stepped off a train with no one waiting to greet her. Her name was Nora. She had a folded letter tucked inside her coat, a carpet bag that held all she hadn't already lost, and a pair of boots too fine for the dirt she was about to walk. She was a mail-order bride. Not for love, at least not the kind you read about in penny novels. She came because someone had written her a letter that said, "If you choose to come, I'll be waiting." But when she arrived in Grady's Hollow, the station was empty. The town, quarantined. A sign nailed to the depot door read, "Fever within. No entry. No exit. No music. No laughter. No man tipping his hat with hope in his eyes. Only wind and dust. And somewhere beyond the closed shutters and locked gates, a doctor who might not even know she'd come. The train pulled away behind her. She stood alone, and still she didn't leave. Because when you've lived a life of being turned away at doors, sometimes you learn to wait a little longer than most. This is the story of what happened next, of a town too scared to open its arms, and a man who hadn't let anyone in since the day he buried the woman he once loved, of how two people, both quiet, both scarred, found a way to speak without words, and how love, the kind that stays, sometimes begins not with a kiss, but with a lamp left burning in a second-story window. Have you ever arrived somewhere hoping to be welcomed, only to find yourself standing alone wondering if you made a mistake? Then maybe this story is for you, because Nora came to Grady's Hollow expecting a stranger. But what she found was someone who'd risk his heart and his safety for a woman no one else dared to reach for. Let's begin. What do you do when you arrive? And the world you hoped for is closed off behind a nailed door. They told her the journey would be long but not lonely. They told her the man she was traveling toward, a Mr. Elias Blackwood, was decent, quiet maybe, but steady, a doctor, a widower. What they didn't say was that the town would be silent when she arrived. Nora Ellison stepped off the train at Grady's Hollow with a carpet bag in one hand and a folded letter in the other. Her best dress clung to her in the July heat, and the wide brim of her straw hat drooped, softened by dust. No one met her. No greetings. No horses. No glances from shop windows. Just stillness. And a sign nailed crooked above the depot door. Quarantine in effect, no entry. The conductor, already climbing back onto the train, glanced her way with a mix of pity and relief. "You can ride on to Larkspur," he said. "Ain't no one coming out to greet you here. Whole town's been closed off near a week." Fever took hold. But Nora didn't move. She looked at the letter again. Read the final line for the 20th time. "If you choose to come, I'll be waiting." And she believed it. Not because she was naive. Not because she was desperate. But because belief was all she had left. When your life has been small and silent long enough, even a stranger's promise can feel like an anchor. So she stayed, alone on the platform, while the whistle pulled away behind her and dust rose up to meet her shoes like a second rejection. But she stood still, because hope, like a fever, doesn't always burn fast. Sometimes it lingers and waits. Some women travel for love. Others travel because there's nothing left to return to. But Nora came because something in her still hoped to be seen. But what happens when the only person who promised to wait can't reach you? What if the only sign you're not alone is the flicker of a light that no one else seems to see? Nora waited, not because it was wise, not because she had a plan. She waited because there was nowhere else to go, and because the letter had ended with a promise. The sun slid down the hills like syrup over hard bread, and still no one came. By nightfall, the platform creaked with its own emptiness. A tumbleweed rolled lazily down the tracks, and even the wind felt like it had abandoned the town. But then, just as she thought to retreat beneath the overhang, for the night she saw it, a light, faint and far off, a flicker in an upstairs window 2 blocks down. She stood, breath held, watched. It didn't move, didn't blink, just burned steady and warm against the boarded-up stillness of every other house. She stepped down from the platform, crossed the street, boots muffled by dust. There was no one, only that one window glowing through sheer curtains. As she reached the edge of the lane, she paused. It wasn't wise to knock on strange doors, especially in a town under quarantine. But there was something about the way that lamp shone. It wasn't just lit, it was waiting. She knocked. Once, then again softer. No answer. But the curtains shifted, and then slowly a hand appeared. A man's hand. Broad, careful, gloved. He didn't open the door, didn't speak. He simply tapped once against the glass pane, then lifted a chalkboard and wrote in clean square letters, "Stay there. Are you ill?" Nora blinked. "No," she said loudly but calm. "Just stranded." He paused, then added another line. "I'm Dr. Blackwood." Her heart stilled. The man behind the window, the one who hadn't written sweet words but steady ones, who signed only as E. Blackwood at the end of every letter, was real, alive, and less than 20 feet away. He motioned to a crate near the steps. Wrote again, "Food inside. You'll be safe in the depot overnight. I'll keep watch." Then he stepped back, lit a second lamp in the same room, and sat where she could see him, facing the window, watching, not controlling, not rescuing, just staying. And that after a lifetime of being dismissed was the first thing that made Nora want to cry. Sometimes the kindest thing someone can do is simply not look away. But what happens when the one person she came for won't let her near him? How close can two people become without ever touching a hand or hearing each other's breath? Each morning the sun rose slow over Grady's Hollow. Each evening it fell behind the church steeple like it was afraid to linger too long. And every day in between, Nora and Dr. Elias Blackwood spoke without voices. He would open the second-story window just enough to slip a clean slate through tied with twine and a stick of chalk. She would scrawl her answers neat at first formal, then slip it back into the crate by the door. Sometimes she'd find bread inside, sometimes a clean cloth or a small jar of honey. He never asked for thanks, but she always left the word grateful at the bottom of her notes. Their messages were simple at first. "Did you sleep? Do you need more food? Rain is coming. You can wait it out in the station." But then the chalkboard messages grew longer, more curious. "What kind of work did you leave behind? Did you choose this marriage or escape something worse?" Nora hesitated before answering that one. She thought of the man she'd nearly married before, the one who said she talked too smart and had hips like oxen. She didn't write that. She only wrote, "I came because no one else asked if I had anything worth staying for." That night he didn't write back, but he lit both windows, left them open longer, and she knew that was his answer. As the days passed, she learned more about him too, that he'd once had a wife, that she died during the winter sickness 2 years back, that since then he'd tended to this town the way a man tends to a wound he doesn't believe will heal but cares for anyway. Nora wrote, "You could have left. Why didn't you?" The answer came the next morning, "Because people needed me, and I'm not sure I could survive needing anyone else." That message made her hands tremble, because deep down she understood. They were both the kind of people who showed up for others, but didn't quite believe anyone would show up for them. Still, each day he stayed at the window, and each night she looked up and saw the same lamp burning. She didn't dare ask what it meant. She just let it stay. But the feelings were growing. And feelings have a way of testing the walls we build no matter how carefully we write around them. Some love stories begin with touch, but others begin with distance and the courage to close it. But what happens when quarantine isn't just in the town, but inside the people themselves? By now you've walked beside Nora through silence, through waiting, through the kind of connection that speaks without sound. What part of her story has stayed with you the most? Was it the moment no one came for her at the station? The quiet courage it took to knock on a stranger's door? Or maybe the chalkboard conversations that made you remember your own longings? Those soft, hidden hopes you thought you'd buried? We'd love to know what have you felt so far. And what are you still hoping will happen next, because Nora's story isn't over. And what's coming will test the heart she's just beginning to trust. What happens when the distance you've built to stay safe is the very thing that might cost you the one person who sees you? The storm came on a Tuesday. Nora had seen it in the way the trees stiffened before dawn, in the stillness of the birds, in the ache behind her knees that always came when something was about to shift. She left her morning message in the crate, just a line and a smile. "If the wind picks up, I'll be in the freight room. Roof's stronger there." But Elias didn't answer. Not that day, not the next. The window stayed dark. The lamp never lit. And Nora felt the old ache creep back into familiar biting. Had he fallen ill? Had he changed his mind? Had she asked for too much, simply by staying visible? By the third day, she stopped writing. By the fourth, she stood in the rain just long enough to feel the cold reach her bones, just to remember what it meant to feel something. That night, thunder cracked the sky open like a secret spilled too loud. She curled in the corner of the station, a quilt around her shoulders, whispering prayers she didn't quite believe in. And then bootsteps. Not a dream. Not memory. Real. Muffled by the mud, urgent, uneven. She sat up just in time to see him, Elias, shoulders-soaked, hat gone, eyes wild. He stood in the doorway, breath caught between apology and fear. "I waited too long," he said. Nora blinked. "What happened?" "There was a girl. In town. Took sick. I stayed to tend her. I thought if I left it'd cost her everything." "And what about me?" she asked softer. His shoulders dropped. "I told myself you'd be safer if I kept my distance. That I couldn't risk bringing sickness to your door. But every day I stayed inside, it wasn't just fear that kept me in. It was the part of me that didn't believe I deserved anyone waiting on me." Nora rose, stepped forward slowly. Rain dripped from his coat onto the station floor. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "Just present." And he was, soaked to the bone, hands trembling. But he was there. For the first time, the space between them was nothing but breath and heartbeat. No chalkboard, no crate, just a man and a woman, both exhausted from waiting to be allowed to need someone. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn handkerchief, not for her tears, for his. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to heal others, but to admit you too are worthy of care. But now that they've crossed the threshold, can two people who've lived behind walls learn how to live beyond them? What happens when someone finally walks through your walls and then doesn't leave? The quarantine wasn't over. But something had shifted. The sickness had thinned. The town had learned to wait. And so had Nora. She no longer asked when the trains would return or when the fences would come down. She asked instead, "What will I do with this day? With this man?" With the space between us now open and warm, Elias began spending his evenings at the station. He brought books, candles, a second chair. At first they sat in silence. But it wasn't the old silence anymore. It was the kind that lets you breathe. Sometimes they spoke of little things, gardening recipes, the strange music of prairie birds at night. Sometimes they asked real questions. "Do you miss her?" Nora asked once. He nodded. "I always will." "Is that why you stayed away from me?" He paused. "No," he said. "I stayed away because I thought I'd forgotten how to open the door. Turns out it was never locked." Later that week, she cooked a stew in the small stove by the platform wall. He showed up with fresh thyme in his coat pocket like a peace offering from a man learning to hope again. She laughed when he coughed at the spice. He smiled when she admitted she'd overcooked the potatoes. They were learning each other like a language neither had spoken in years. One night he didn't bring the chair. He brought a blanket, sat beside her, close enough to feel her warmth but not to crowd. "I keep wondering," he whispered, "how I survived so long without someone knowing what time I eat or whether I've had enough rest." "You were busy saving everyone else," she said. He looked down. "And you?" he asked. "Why did you really come?" Nora folded her hands. "I came because I was tired of waiting for permission to be loved." He looked up, startled. Then slowly, gently, he placed his hand over hers. "I don't know what I can offer you, Nora. I'm still learning how to live beyond survival." She squeezed his fingers. "Then let's learn together." The lamp in the window never burned alone after that. Sometimes the real cure isn't found in medicine, but in someone pulling up a chair beside you and staying. But can love that bloomed behind closed doors survive when the world opens up again? What do you do when the world says you're free to leave, but your heart asks you to stay? The day the quarantine lifted was quiet. No bells. No town crier. Just a wagon passing through the gate that had once been chained shut, and a nod from the sheriff as he lowered the sign that had kept the world at bay. Nora watched from the depot steps. The air smelled different, like possibility, like dust that might become a road. That afternoon, the first train came through in weeks. People gathered in careful clumps. Shopkeepers unlocked front doors with reverent hands. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Nora realized she had a choice. No one was keeping her here. No closed tracks. No fevered risk. No waiting. She could go. She could return to Nebraska to the rented room with thin curtains and thinner company. She could answer another letter, send a new one, start over, again. But when Elias walked up the hill that evening, carrying a loaf of fresh bread wrapped in cloth and his stethoscope still slung around his neck, she realized something quietly enormous. She didn't want to leave, not because she was needed, but because she was known. Later that night, he sat beside her on the station bench. The fire between them was low and steady. "I reckon you'll be heading back soon," he said carefully. "Now that the rails are open." She studied him for a long moment, then said, "I might not." Elias turned surprised. "You sure know," she said, "but I'm sure I've never felt more seen than I do on this porch." He looked down at his hands. "You could have more than a porch," he said. "You could have the whole house." Nora blinked. "You asking me to stay? I'm not asking you to serve," he said, "or to prove anything. I'm asking if you'd like a home where you don't have to knock anymore." She said nothing, just reached into her pocket and pulled out the first letter he ever wrote. "If you choose to come, I'll be waiting." "I did," she whispered. "And I still am," he replied. And just like that, the fences came down for both of them. Sometimes the greatest freedom isn't the one offered by the world, but the one we give ourselves to love without fear and to stay without asking permission. But is this truly a beginning, or just the end of the waiting? How do you know it's real? When no one shouts it from the rooftops, but it shows up every morning like sunlight through lace curtains. Nora never moved into the house with fanfare. There was no wedding dress, no announcement in the town paper, no grand speech from the porch, just a lamp moved from the depot into the front room, just her shawl folded neatly on the hook by the door, her sewing basket on the hearth, her laughter soft and rare beginning to find its way into the kitchen. Elias never asked her to change a thing. He didn't rearrange the furniture, didn't expect warm bread each morning, didn't speak more than he had to. But he looked for her in every room. And when she wasn't there, he listened for the rustle of her skirts before going back to his work. Some days she followed him on rounds. Other days she sat by the window and wrote letters not because she was lonely, but because she finally had something worth writing home about. Once she asked him why he kept the lamp burning in the same window every night. He didn't answer at first, just looked at her, then said, "I used to light it because I hoped someone might be coming, and now I light it because someone stayed." She reached for his hand, and in the stillness that followed, there was nothing uncertain about it. They didn't need vows. The porch steps, the borrowed blanket, the marks from her boots on the kitchen floor, those were the promises. Nora had once come looking for a place to be welcomed. What she found was a home that never asked her to knock. Some love stories aren't loud. They live in warm cups passed across a table in blankets folded, without being asked, in lamps that burn long after the need for them has passed just in case. Edith was once told she took up too much space, too heavy for a saddle, too wide for a dance floor, too large, they said, for love to find its way in. But they were wrong, because the man who loved her in the end didn't ask her to shrink. He just pulled up a chair and sat beside her. He saw the gentleness in her hands, the wisdom in her quiet, the kind of strength that never needed to shout to be real. And together they built a home that didn't care about corset sizes or who fit through which door. A home where kindness came first and beauty had nothing to prove. If you've ever felt like you had to earn your place in someone's heart, this story is a reminder you are already enough. You don't have to be less to be loved. If Edith's journey spoke to something tender in you, we'd be honored to have you stay with us at None. Wild West Saga. Leave us a comment below. Would you like to hear what happened next for Edith? Or would you love to hear more stories like hers? Share this video with someone who's ever felt overlooked. And don't forget to subscribe for more quiet tales of second chances, dignity, and love that doesn't ask you to change. Until next time, stay kind, stay steady, stay you.